Today I would like to address the ever-present but all too often ignored question, can I communicate an idea to you? There are at least three problems with every attempt at communication. First, the problem of other minds. There is no way to know for sure that anyone else exists. That is, to prove outside of your own perception of them. This is true for physical things, and all the more true for ephemeral things like the mind. The second and related problem concerns successful termination. By this, I mean knowing when an idea has successfully been communicated. The ultimate judge of whether the idea has been successfully communicated is you, whereas a computer program, say, can terminate with yes or no based on the rules of the system. Successful communication is a matter of subjective experience. Consider now. I have an idea, presumably, that I want to communicate to you. This quote-unquote second problem with communication. How do you know when it makes sense to you? What happens? Likewise, if it doesn't make sense, what proof can you offer that it doesn't? What can you point to in order to say, this makes sense, or this does not make sense? Certainly, it must be your own mind, which can't really be observed outside of itself. The third problem, then, is perhaps the most important, and concerns the nature of absolute truth. Functionally, it probably doesn't matter if you can prove that something exists outside of your mind, or if something has been successfully communicated. But I would conjecture that the question of whether or not there exists a non-relative truth can have practical applications, along with the obvious philosophical applications. In essence, to say that it is possible to communicate an idea implies some underlying truth. If I have idea X, and I express it through the means of, say, a video online, and you, in another theoretically existing mind, take this idea and convert it through whatever means these sorts of things occur, and now idea X is in your mind, then we have communicated. Imagine that I wanted to communicate to you how to convert the audio-video wire on a 1983 Panasonic tube television so that you can play your old Nintendo on it. This is a relatively concrete idea and would involve the different components, the wire, the tools, what you need to do, the video games, perhaps some advice on what to avoid doing, the converter box thing, etc. Now we can abstract all of those things and just call them, well, whatever we want to. We could make them into shapes or colors or whatever else, numbers, letters. And we could do this with all ideas that can be communicated. Abstract them into these units or whatever, and then talk about them. It is through this basic process that we can have, quote-unquote, idea X in the first place. Within the set of concrete examples of ideas, there are truths and falsehoods. If I say, the TV is on, and it is on, then we mark this statement as true. If I say, the best Mario Kart game was the SNES version, then by what standard are we judging the truth value of this statement? Basically, I could offer an argument that you would either label true or not true. Best implies a kind of binary. Super Mario Kart either is the best or it is not the best Mario Kart game. There isn't really a gray area within that question, even though the answer is relative to the hearer's personal prejudices. What's interesting is that, in a way, that is also true of the TV being on or not. We all know it's on now, off now, on now. But how do you prove it? And I mean, to a person who is dead set for whatever reason, against believing that it is on or off. I mean, if they're gonna say that thing's off when it's on, and you show them that it's on, and they still don't believe it, what can you possibly do? In that case, the two statements are essentially the same, whether you're saying something that's proven objectively or something that's proven subjectively. So with all statements. There does exist fuzzy logic, where the statement can be broken down into a kind of gray area between true and false. But I would suggest, and I'm sure I'm not alone, that any of these quote-unquote pixels in the gray area can be broken down further into binary. And we have this one. It is possible for me to communicate an idea to you. What then are our options? 1. Yes, it is possible for me to communicate an idea to you. 2. No, it is not possible for me to communicate an idea to you. 3. It is neither possible for me to communicate an idea to you, nor impossible for me to communicate an idea to you. A quick aside. In Buddhist philosophy, there is something called that word right there, which deals with the possible outcomes of a proposition, such as whether it's possible to communicate an idea. This is a 4-part system, with the 3 already mentioned and a category for both. Thus, it is both possible and impossible for me to communicate an idea to you. Obviously, the neither and both options are different. But in terms of what we are presently after, they function as the same basic thing, and so we will treat them the same way. Essentially, if both are true, then neither is true, since the two possibilities are mutually exclusive. Again, pull back to the video at hand. Imagine that you can hear what I am saying to you right now. Does it make sense to you? Oddly enough, even if it does not, if you have just made an evaluation of your own thoughts, then something must have been communicated. And thus, it is possible to communicate. If it is possible to communicate, then it cannot be impossible to communicate. It can only be one of the two. So then why consider neither at all? It is conceivable that even a statement as clearly binary as this may be flawed in such a way that the system we are currently using is simply wrong. Sort of like when you try to run a program on an operating system that doesn't recognize it. To say that it is neither possible nor impossible to communicate an idea may sound enticing to the malcontented intellectuals of the world, or appeal to those who want to experience some sort of mind expansion. But imagine trying to communicate that idea to someone. Wouldn't you need to be successful to do so? And then, wouldn't that mean it is possible to communicate an idea? More likely, you would run into the idea that it is impossible. Statement number 2. Here, there is a quick retort. Why on earth are you trying then? We have essentially entered into a tacit agreement that it is possible for something to be communicated, simply by the fact that we are involved in this exchange. Typically, it's going to be your will to power philosophical line that leads to the convoluted logic of trying to convince someone that you can't ever convince them of anything. And that's really what's at issue in a lot of ways here at the turn of the 21st century. Well, they might say, we all find God in our own way, but simultaneously believe that so-and-so is going to hell. It's useful as long as you don't get pressed up against a true contemplation of truth. So ultimately, we can make a statement. All knowledge can be categorized into one of 3 categories: yes, no, and neither. Then we can actually evaluate that claim using itself. Is that statement true? It either is or it is not.
Or neither, of course.
Sometimes you have to stand back a little bit and think to yourself, does this make sense? Because it's okay if it doesn't, right? Don't just go along with it. Think to yourself, does that make sense? It's okay. What then is idea X? What is this video trying to communicate? How to get your TV to play old video games? Was it about categorizing things into one of three categories? There must be an element of whether an idea can be communicated or not. Like a Russian nesting doll, idea X being communicated is about whether you can indeed communicate idea X. There's something intriguing about an idea that can be fed back into itself. And how do you know if it was successful?